The desperate Plaith crystalline spires of Zephyra Prime shattered like glass under their relentless assault. Ambassador Kelther stood at the observation deck of the Concordat's High Council chamber, watching his world die. The Void Eaters moved through space like living shadows, their organic ships pulsing with bioluminescent hunger as they consumed everything in their path ships, stations, even the orbital defenses that had protected his homeworld for 3,000 years. How many? Council Matriarch Velsara's voice cracked. Her normally iridescent skin faded to a dull gray. 17 colony worlds gone, Kelther replied, his 4 eyes reflecting the flames below. The 4th Fleet was annihilated at the Kepler threshold. The 5th Fleet? He paused, mandibles clicking in distress. The 5th Fleet no longer responds? Velsara turned away from the destruction, her elaborate ceremonial robes dragging across the marble floor. Then we have no choice. We must petition the lesser species for aid. The Draknari have refused, another council member interjected. The Scythian Empire claims neutrality. The Luminary Collective has sealed their borders. Kelther felt his pride, the pride of a species that had ruled the galactic core for millennia crumble like the spires outside. There is one option remaining. The council chamber fell silent. They all knew what he meant. The humans? Velsara's tone dripped with disdain. Those primitive warmongers? They've barely achieved faster-than-light travel. They're children playing with fusion reactors. Children, Kelther said quietly, who have survived 6 extinction-level events on their own world, who have weaponized everything from splitting atoms to bending gravity, who fight wars against themselves with such ferocity that their own planet bears the scars. He met the matriarch's gaze. Perhaps we need warmongers. 3 days later, Kelther's diplomatic vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. His first officer, a young Zephyrin named Thelson, studied the sensor readings with obvious confusion. Ambassador, these readings can't be correct. The humans have militarized their entire solar system. Kelther leaned forward, examining the data. Weapon platforms orbited every major celestial body. Automated defense grids created a labyrinth of overlapping fire zones. Hidden fleet installations dotted the asteroid belt. Even their moon, their own satellite, bristled with railgun emplacements. They live, Kelther observed, as if expecting invasion at any moment. Because we are. A harsh voice crackled over the comm system. Unknown vessel, this is UEDS Sentinel Command. State your purpose or be destroyed. You have 30 seconds. Thelson's skin paled. They're targeting us with 17 different weapon systems. Ambassador, they could vaporize us before we could even charge our shields. Kelther activated the comm. This is Ambassador Kelther of the Zephyrin Concordat, requesting audience with your military command on a matter of galactic security. A pause. Then, galactic security. Right, the Concordat, that's ignored every human petition for the last 2 centuries, suddenly wants to talk. The voice was female, tinged with bitter amusement. Follow the designated flight path. Deviate by 1 meter, and we'll turn you into expanding plasma. The path took them past Mars, where massive construction yards assembled warships of brutal utilitarian design. No elegant curves or artistic flourishes, just angular armor plating, weapon ports, and engines powerful enough to generate gravity wells. These weren't ships built for exploration. They were ships built to kill. Earth itself shocked him more. Through the viewport, he could see the scars of their violent history, the faded radiation signatures of their nuclear age. The atmospheric cleanup stations scrubbing pollution from their early industrial period. The rebuilt cities that had been destroyed and raised again like phoenixes. This species had nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and somehow clawed back from the brink each time. They landed at UEDS headquarters in what humans, called Geneva a fortress of reinforced concrete and steel disguised as an administrative complex. Armed soldiers in powered armor flanked every corridor, their weapons tracking his every movement. These weren't ceremonial guards. These were veterans, their armor scarred from combat, their eyes holding the hard edge of survivors. General Sarah Chon waited in a conference room stripped of any warmth. She was small by human standards, but Kelther had studied enough human history to know that size meant nothing to this species. She wore a black uniform decorated with ribbons that he recognized as military honors, each one representing bloodshed, sacrifice, and victory earned through suffering. Ambassador. She didn't offer the traditional Zephyrin greeting. I'll save us both time. You're here because the Void Eaters are eating you alive, and everyone else in the galaxy has told you to go to hell. So now you're slumming it with humanity, hoping we're stupid enough to die for species that have treated us like ignorant children for 200 years. She leaned forward. Did I miss anything? Kelther's pride bristled, but he forced his mandibles into a submissive position. General Chun, the Void Eaters represent an existential threat to all sentient life. If the Concordat falls, then they'll move on to the next species, and the next, until eventually they reach Sol. I know. Chun pulled up a holographic display showing the Void Eaters' expansion pattern. We've been tracking them for 8 months. We knew they'd reach you eventually. We also knew exactly what would happen. You'd lose, panic, and come begging. Then you understand the urgency. What I understand, Chun interrupted, is that 3 years ago, when the outer colonies were raided by Scythian pirates, we requested Concordat assistance. You told us to handle our own internal security matters. When we discovered the Draknari were conducting illegal genetic experiments on abducted humans, we brought evidence to your council. You called it regrettable, but not a matter for Concordat intervention. Her voice could have frozen hydrogen. Now you want our help. Kelther felt something he'd never experienced in 70 years of diplomatic service. Shame. You're right. We were arrogant, dismissive. We treated your species as insignificant because you hadn't existed long enough to earn our respect. He straightened, allowing his true feelings to show. But I have seen what the Void Eaters do, General. They don't conquer. They don't negotiate. They consume. Every world, every species, every trace of civilization gone, converted into more of themselves. And you think we can stop them? I think, Kelther said carefully, that humanity might be the only species crazy enough to try. For the first time, something flickered in Chun's expression. Not quite amusement, but close. Crazy. That's what the galaxy thinks of us, isn't it? Too violent. Too aggressive. Too willing to sacrifice for victory. She stood, walking to a wall covered in photograph soldiers in various uniforms spanning centuries. Do you know what these are? Memorials? These are reminders. Every soldier in these photos died defending Earth from threats most species never face. We've fought ice ages, plagues, world wars, asteroid impacts, and each other. We've nearly gone extinct more times than our historians can count. She touched one photograph, a young woman in combat armor. My daughter. Killed defending Europa Station from Scythian raiders. The raiders your Concordat called not a matter for intervention. Kelther's heart sank. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be honest. Chun turned to face him. If we help you, and we survive, what happens then? Do we go back to being the violent children that polite society ignores? Or does something change? I cannot speak for the entire Concordat. Then this conversation is over. But Kelther pressed forward desperately. I can promise you this. If humanity saves us, I will spend every remaining day of my life ensuring the galaxy knows what you truly are. Not warmongers. Not primitives. He met her gaze with all 4 eyes. Survivors, protectors, the species that came when no one else would. The door opened. A woman entered, human, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and a scar running from her left eye to her jaw. She wore the insignia of a captain, and her eyes held the same hardness as Chun's. But underneath, Kelther glimpsed something else, a burning intensity that reminded him of stars going supernova. Captain Maya Rodriguez, Sean introduced, commander of the UEDS Defiance and the Rapid Response Fleet. If, and that's a massive, if we agree to this insanity, she'll be leading the operation. Rodriguez studied Kelther with unsettling focus. How many ships do the Void Eaters have at Zephira Prime? Current estimates suggest 300 capital-class organisms and thousands of smaller attack forms. And you want us to fight that with what, exactly? Harsh language and optimism? We can provide you with intelligence, tactical data, and no. Rodriguez's voice cut like steel. If we do this, we do it our way. Human tactics, human strategy, human command structure. You provide support where we need it, but you don't question our methods, no matter how brutal or insane they seem. She leaned in close. Because, Ambassador, if we're going to save your species, we're going to do it the only way we know how, with fire, fury, and a complete disregard for the odds. Kelther looked between the two human commanders, finally understanding what he'd walked into. The galaxy had dismissed humanity because they were terrifying, not in their technology or their numbers, but in their absolute refusal to accept defeat. They were a species that had stared into the abyss so many times they'd learned to stare back. I accept your terms. Chun and Rodriguez exchanged glances. Something unspoken passed between them, the communication of warriors who'd fought together before. 48 hours, Sean said finally. We'll mobilize the 3rd and 5th fleets. 200 ships. 20,000 personnel. She smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. The galaxy wanted us to stay quiet and in our corner of space. Time to show them why that was probably a good idea. As Kelther left the headquarters, he watched human soldiers rushing to their stations, saw ships powering up across the planet, felt the entire system shift into a state of coordinated, martial efficiency that his own species would need weeks to achieve. Humanity was going to war dot, and for the first time since the Void Eaters had appeared, Kelther felt something he thought he'd lost, hope. But it was hope tempered with terror, because he was about to witness what happened when humanity stopped restraining itself. The galaxy had spent 2 centuries trying to civilize them, to make them peaceful, to teach them diplomacy over violence. The galaxy was about to learn why that had been a terrible mistake. Asterisk, fire, and FURY. The hyperspace transition into the Zephira system was unlike anything Kelther had ever witnessed. The human fleet didn't emerge in a standard formation, a neat, orderly line that announced their presence and allowed for diplomatic overtures. Instead, they tore into real space like predators bursting from an ambush. Ships already at combat speed, weapons hot, their engine signatures deliberately amplified to blind enemy sensors. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UEDS Defiance, her scarred face illuminated by tactical displays showing 300 Void Eater organisms and the dying embers of Zephira Prime. The bridge crew worked in controlled chaos-shouted coordinates. System confirmations, targeting solutions calculated and recalculated in seconds. All ships. This is Defiance Actual. Maya's voice cut through the comm channels with absolute authority. Execute Protocol Ember. I want those bastards confused, scattered, and terrified. Show them what humanity learned from fighting itself. Kelther, observing from a secondary station, watched in growing horror and awe as the human fleet shattered every tactical doctrine he'd ever studied. Ships broke formation immediately, scattering in seemingly random directions. Smaller vessels, human destroyers, accelerated to insane speeds, their crews subjected to G-forces that would kill most species. They dove directly into the Void Eater swarm, like insects attacking a giant, except these insects carried nuclear warheads and fury. "Contact in 30 seconds, the tactical officer announced. "Void Eaters are attempting to surround us." "Let them try," Maya said coldly. "Hell, execute maneuver Delta 7. Weapons, I want full spread on my mark." The Defiance spun on its axis, a move that should have been impossible for a ship of its mass, and opened fire with every weapon system simultaneously. Railguns threw tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. Missile pods vomited swarms of independently targeting warheads. Laser batteries carved through void dark flesh. And then, most shocking of all, the ship deployed something Kelther had never seen. Kamikaze drones got hundreds of small craft, each piloted by advanced AI and packed with antimatter charges, launched from concealed bays. They didn't maneuver for optimal firing positions. They simply accelerated to maximum velocity and slammed into Void Eater organisms, detonating in blossoms of annihilation that carved chunks from the bioships. "Madness," Thelsin whispered beside Kelther. "They're throwing away resources." "No," Kelther corrected, finally understanding. "They're forcing the enemy to react. Watch." The Void Eaters, expecting conventional warfare, had begun to swarm toward the human fleet's center. Instead, they found themselves chasing ghosts. Human ships never stayed in one place, never committed to a single vector. They fought like Earth's ancient fighter pilots boom and zoom, hit and run, creating chaos that their enemy's hive intelligence struggled to counter. A massive Void Eater command organism easily, 5 times the size of any human ship, moved to engage the Defiance directly. Its biocannons charged, energy crackling across its chitinous surface. "Target locked," Maya said, her voice steady. "All power to forward shields." "Ramming speed, Captain?" The helmsman's voice cracked with disbelief. "You heard me. If we're going to hell, we're taking that ugly son of a bitch with us." The Defiance surged forward, directly into the enemy's firing solution. The Void Eater unleashed its weapons beams of converted matter that had obliterated Zephyrin dreadnoughts. The Defiance's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before collapsing. Hull plating sublimated. Compartments decompressed. Alarms screamed throughout the ship, but Maya never flinched. Now, the ship's main spinal cannon, a weapon that required the entire reactor output the fire discharged. The beam punched through the Void Eater's center mass, boring a tunnel of superheated destruction through organs and biological systems. For a moment, the creature seemed to hang in space, still alive, still fighting, and Maya triggered the secondary payload, a bomb they'd fired into the tunnel, a fusion warhead set to detonate inside the creature's body. The explosion tore the command organism apart from within. Bioluminescent ichor sprayed across the void as the creature died, its psychic death scream disrupting the coordination of dozens of nearby Void Eaters. "Damage report," Maya barked, gripping her command chair as the ship shuddered. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Forward shields offline. Casualties at..." "Captain, we lost 43 people in that attack." Maya's jaw tightened, but her voice remained level. "Forward their names to personnel. They died protecting 2 species today." She turned to the tactical display. "All ships, the command organism is down. Execute Phase 2, Wolfpack Protocol." Across the battlefield, the human fleet shifted tactics again. They formed into small hunting groups, 3 to 5 ships, and began systematically isolating and destroying Void Eater organisms. They didn't fight fair. They ambushed from behind debris fields. They used their own damaged ships as bait, luring enemies into kill zones. They deployed experimental weapons that violated a dozen galactic treaties on humane warfare, sonic disruptors that scrambled biological neural systems, nanite clouds that ate through organic armor, even gravity mines that crushed enemy ships into singularities. Kellar watched a human cruiser, the UEDS Vengeance, sustain catastrophic damage, its reactor breaching. Standard protocol demanded the crew evacuate. Instead, the captain deliberately steered the dying ship into a cluster of void eaters and detonated the reactor manually, taking 17 enemy organisms with him. "They're dying," Kelther said, his voice hollow. "For us, for species that treated them like animals." Maya overheard him. She walked over, her uniform torn and bloodied from when an explosion had thrown her against a bulkhead. "We're not dying for you, Ambassador. We're dying because if we don't stop these things here, they'll reach Earth eventually. Every human who dies today is buying time for the billions back home." She met his gaze. "But make no mistake, this is what we are. We don't fight wars from comfortable distances. We don't preserve our forces for future battles. When we go to war, we commit everything, because we learned long ago that half measures get everyone killed." A proximity alarm blared. 3 Void Eater assault forms had broken through the human perimeter and were accelerating toward the Defiance. "Weapon systems offline," the tactical officer reported. "We're a sitting duck." Maya smiled a terrible, fierce expression. "Then we improvise. Engineering, overload the port side reactor stabilizers. Helm, give me a hard spin to starboard on my mark. Asterisk, Captain, that'll cause a reactor cascade." "Exactly. Those things want to eat us? Let them choke on it." The Defiance spun violently, deliberately destabilizing its own power systems. Plasma vented from ruptured coolant lines, creating a superheated cloud around the ship. The Void Eaters, following their biological imperative to consume, flew directly into the plasma storm. Their organic hulls couldn't withstand the temperatures. They writhed and burned, biological matter boiling away until only charred husks remained. "Damage control, get those fires out before we lose more decks," Maya ordered. "Come, status of the fleet? We've lost 37 ships. Another 43 are combat ineffective." "But Captain," the communications officer looked up, tears streaming down her face. "The Void Eaters are retreating. We broke them." The bridge fell silent. On the tactical display, the remaining Void Eater organisms were withdrawing, fleeing into hyperspace with the human fleet in pursuit, harrying them like wolves chasing wounded prey. "All ships break off pursuit," Maya commanded. "Let them run. Let them tell whatever passes for their leadership what they found here." She turned to Kelther. "Ambassador, your homeworld is secure. For now." Kelther couldn't speak. Through the viewport, he saw the cost. Human ships drifting dead in space, debris fields that had been living, breathing soldiers minutes ago, the scars burned across his planet's surface. The humans had lost nearly a third of their fleet. Thousands had died, and they'd won over the next hours. As rescue operations began and the human fleet regrouped, Kelther walked the corridors of the Defiance. He saw medics treating horrific injuries without complaint. He saw engineers repairing critical systems while standing in ankle-deep water from burst pipes. He saw soldiers, some barely old enough to be called adults, sitting in shocked silence, processing the fact that they were still alive. In the ship's chapel humans maintained religious spaces even on warships. He found Maya. She was alone, standing before a wall of photographs. New ones had been added. 43 faces. 43 names. 43 people who would never go home. "We have a tradition," Maya said without turning. After every battle, the commanding officer memorizes the names and faces of everyone lost. It's our way of making sure they're not just statistics. She touched one photograph. A young man with an easy smile. Ensign Marcus Chun, 19 years old, wanted to be a xenobiologist. Died when the forward shields collapsed. He was General Chun's nephew. I'm so sorry. Don't. Maya's voice was sharp. Don't apologize. Don't thank us. Don't tell us we're heroes. We're survivors, Ambassador. We do what we must because the alternative is extinction. She finally turned to face him. Your people will recover. You'll rebuild. And maybe you'll remember what happened here. Remember that the species you dismissed, the species you called warmongers and primitives, came when you called. Not because you deserved it, but because we know what it's like to face annihilation alone. She walked past him, pausing at the door. General Chun is coordinating with your government on defensive strategies. We're leaving 3 fleets in your system until you can rebuild your own defenses. We're also providing you with weapons technology, not because we trust you, but because next time we might not get here in time. Next time? Maya's smile was grim. The Void Eaters aren't gone, Ambassador. We hurt them, but we didn't kill them. They'll regroup, evolve, adapt. That's what predators do. And when they come back, you'll need to be ready to fight like we taught you with everything you have, holding nothing back, because survival isn't pretty or noble. It's brutal, bloody, and necessary. 3 days later, Kelther stood before the Zephyrin High Council. His report had been transmitted ahead, but they demanded to hear it directly. He told them everything. The human tactics, the casualties, the sheer, terrifying efficiency with which humanity waged war. Barbaric, one council member declared. Sacrificing ships, using suicide tactics. Effective, Kelther interrupted, his voice carrying an authority he'd never possessed before. They saved us, not with diplomacy or superior technology, but with the one thing we'd lost, the will to fight at any cost. He pulled up footage from the battle, the Defiance's suicidal charge. The kamikaze drones, the captain who detonated his own reactor. This is what we face in humanity. Not allies, not servants, not the primitive species we can safely ignore. He met each council member's gaze in turn. We face a species that has survived everything their universe could throw at them and emerged stronger every time. A species that treats war as a necessary evil, but prosecutes it with absolute commitment. A species that will die before they surrender. Matriarch Velsara, who had opposed the human alliance, sat in silence for a long moment. What do you recommend, Ambassador? I recommend we learn from them. I recommend we treat them as equals, not out of charity, but out of recognition that they've earned it in blood. Kelther straightened his ceremonial robes. And I recommend we pray to whatever gods we believe in, that humanity never decides we're the enemy. Because if they brought this much fury to save us, I cannot imagine what they would bring to destroy us. The message spread across the galaxy within days. Species that had ignored or dismissed humanity suddenly reassessed. The Draknari quietly withdrew from disputed territories. The Scythian Empire issued a formal apology for the Europa Station raid. The Luminary Collective, who had sealed their borders, sent diplomatic overtures to Earth. On the Defiance, Maya watched the diplomatic traffic with cynical amusement. Fear, she said to her first officer. That's what changes minds. Not compassion. Not justice. Fear. Do you think it will last? Maya looked out at the stars, infinite, cold, and full of threats humanity would someday have to face. No, fear fades. They'll forget, or convince themselves we're not that dangerous. And then we'll have to remind them again. She turned away from the viewport. But for now, let them fear. Let them remember. Let them know that humanity doesn't ask permission to exist. We earn it every single day by refusing to die. In the darkness of space, the human fleet began its journey home. Behind them, Zephyra Prime started to heal. Ahead of them, Earth waited a small blue marble that had produced the most terrifying warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Not because humans were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but because they were survivors. And survivors, when pushed to the edge, would do anything to ensure their species lived another day. The galaxy had begged for help. Humanity had answered with fire, and the universe would never be the same. Asterisk.